Welcome to the Sencast. My name is Dale Pickles. I'm the Managing Director of B Squared and the host of the Sencast. If you have just found the Sencast, then welcome to the podcast. Everyone's here to learn more about special educational needs and disability. In this episode, we discuss assessing the growing complexity of learners in schools, and I was joined by Jordan Garratt from Sensory Classroom. Sensory Classroom provide curriculum and resources for children with SEND, focusing on sensory and communication. And Jordan also shares ideas, support and resources through Instagram, TikTok and her weekly blog. The Sencast is created by us here at B Squared, and we help to show the small sets of progress pupils with SEND make, and we help schools to show progress from starting point for a wide range of abilities and ages. For the most complex students, we have our engagement steps framework. So if you're thinking I'm struggling or showing progress for my complex students, you need to look at our engagement steps. Really going to help. But it's just one of our many frameworks. And if you want to find out more about engagement steps or our other assessment frameworks, visit the B Squared website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through our assessment software and our different frameworks. Now, let's get on with that podcast. My guest this week is Jordan from Sensory Classroom. Sensory Classroom provides curriculum and resources for children with SEND, focusing on sensory and communication. And Jordan shares ideas, support and resources through Instagram, TikTok and her weekly podcast. Welcome to the show, Jordan.
Thank you, Dale. Happy to be back.
You are very welcome. Is it fun being a guest on somebody else's podcast?
So much, yeah, so much. No preparation, just get to, come on by, talk about what I love. Yeah, I love it.
And then you just click and you go and it's like, I don't have to edit that. I don't have to do anything.
Yeah, I feel a bit downy today. Yeah, it's nice.
Love it. Okay, so the needs around SEND are increasing in schools, so both in terms of numbers of pupils and complexity of needs. And lots of schools are struggling with the best way to support their students effectively. They want to do their best for their students, but there is extremely limited guidance from the DFE around supporting pupils with SEND.
Yeah.
In reality, there's two documents. Well, they're code of practice, but in terms of curriculum, you've got the engagement model and then there are the pre-key stage standards. And what most people don't realise is they're both end of key stage.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, there's really no guidance at all on what to do with these sensory learners. I mean, you can look at what to do in nursery, but then lots of the learners that we have in mainstream now aren't at that stage even. And then, it doesn't work for them because they're bigger, more robust. They're good at climbing and throwing all those gross motor skills, but their academic learning looks different. They're different to engage and all of those things. It's a whole different ball game. So I think lots of educators are coming to my page wanting to do best for their children, desperately wanting answers and to, for them to thrive in education, but just really not sure what that looks like.
No. And I've not been a fan of engagement model since it was initially announced. The concept as an ongoing thing where you're thinking about engagement and you were using the 7 areas originally, then onto the 5, and you're using them to discuss engagement and you want more engagement, that completely makes sense. That, yes, 100% more engagement improves outcomes. But in reality, that is all the engagement model is.
Yeah, and also it's very person heavy. So to get the engagement, you need to be fully present and with the child. So when are you filling out this quite in-depth paperwork on recording observations? So what we've been doing is using it with our PMLD learners, but we have to record ourselves and then watch it back. I mean, when do teaching assistants realistically have time, page time, because I wouldn't want to do it in their own time, to watch back the whole session again to observe the changes? It's not realistic. It's a great idea, measuring engagement. There's certainly value in that, of course. And it's a really lovely way of showing that time progression that we're getting, but progression all the same, which is really exciting. But it was definitely written by somebody that isn't in a busy classroom. It just isn't practical. You do not have 2 adults per child to be able to run these kind of assessments. So it wouldn't be the only assessment that I could do.
And I think with the engagement model, saying the original research by Barry Carpenter and the CLDD project, absolutely agree with. And then as part of the Roch review in 2016 to 2018, they decided to use that as this is a good way of assessing. And again, it's the remit of the Roch review is the engagement model. The kind of the output of what you expect to do with the engagement model is just report they're on the engagement model at the end of key stage 1, possibly now, but definitely the end of key stage 2. And again, the guidance on who it's for is really written badly, because it talks about children on the engagement model at the end of the key stage. It's like, that's great. What am I doing at year 1? Are they on the engagement model at this point? What's the criteria type stuff? So that's all missing. But it's focusing on engagement. And you can adapt what you do to make a child a lot more engaged by doing all the things they want to do. But are you actually working towards the outcomes they need?
Yeah. My understanding was the legal requirement is to follow their EHCP. So it's individual, right?
Yeah.
The EHCP, the Educational Healthcare Plan, written by professionals and with parents and carers, adults that know them really well, can to build this set of legal contracted requirements for the school and the team around the child or the learner to follow up until they're 25. And that's awesome. But so many of the targets are long-term goals. So it's really hard to pick out what that looks like in the short term. So then you build an IEP, so an individual educational plan from the EHCP on what you're working in the now, what you're working in that term or that half term, and then you progress from there. And it's all linked and drawing from the EHCP. But my understanding is that is the legal requirement for those learners with an EHCP, whether they're in mainstream or special education. So if that's a legal requirement, that can give us a lot of freedom to make the curriculum really bespoke and really engaging and motivating for each individual learner. So if you're a teaching assistant or a teacher listening to this and thinking, but what does that look like? Then a great place to start is looking at the learner, looking at their EHCP and looking at their IEPs, but also thinking about the team around the child and getting their input on, and the learner that they can give it, of course, what is heaven to them? What would the ideal day look like to them? And starting from that as inspiration, the wonderful late, great Flo Longhorn put together the happiness audit. And it's really available actually now. Since she retired, she made all of her resources freely available, which just shows what a wonderful advocate and legacy she has left for us all. But the happiness audit is a wonderful audit, and you are literally assessing happiness. What is their happy place? From a sensory point of view, from an environmental point of view, from a learning, communication sense, it's all on there. But also then in turn, you can read that and find out what hell is for them. What are their triggers? What makes them dysregulated? And then that also, along with the EHCP, could be a really great start to build a curriculum that is suited for the learners that are so unique and different from maybe that we're used to as mainstream teachers. So if you've got a learner coming to your class and arriving to your class soon, or they're new to your room, it's a really lovely audit to use to get to know them really quickly, to learn how to motivate and engage them in a subject group that they're not naturally as interested in. Of course, it's easy to engage them in subjects that they're interested in, whether that be musical instruments, climbing, PE, numbers, sorting, colours, maybe there's something there. And then it's easy to engage them, but there's other topics, depending on the child, that can be quite difficult. And of course, we want to offer a well-rounded, broad curriculum. And my offers use these kind of tools to work out, okay, what is heaven to them? How can we make statistics accessible, realistic, meaningful for somebody that's working at a 3-month level? Well, I've done it. I've worked it out. I've spent my whole career trying to work it out so that other people don't have to start from scratch like I did with nothing. And I've got what statistics looks like for somebody working at 3 months all the way up to, year 1, and then they can catch up with their national curriculum.
So What is statistics then for a 3-month-old? Because I'm literally going, are you talking about like anticipation?
Well, statistics on its core is sorting and organizing, right? It's sorting and organizing data, and it's working out what somebody's favorite might be. So at a very early stage, it's having a favorite thing, exploring a range of textures or colors so that you know the diversity and variety, so that you can then be able to sort them and order them and organize them by materials or by color or by animal type. But before that, you need to know what they are. And then that leads on to finding items in sensory trade and matching and finding the same, which lots of our autistic learners are incredibly good at. Sorting and finding and organizing, lining up, and all of those things are often great skills. So that can be really motivating. And then it can look like pictograms and tallies and bar charts, and then you're leading on to year one stuff where you can then go on the national curriculum. But there's a bit of a gap with what that looks like before that stage. And I've kind of filled those gaps with every area of the curriculum. So not just math, but English too. What does it look like if they're pre-speaking, pre-writing, pre-reading, pre-listening, sometimes visually impaired and all of those things. What does English look like for those children? I've worked it out. So it's that really. I've kind of gone through every single stage and step with your support, actually, with B Squared's objective support on what it looks like for each learner at each stage. And I've translated that into lessons and resources.
So what's interesting is when I work, obviously all I do is kind of talk to schools and support them around assessment and data and progress, and assessment is different to curriculum, very linked, but different. And we generally, when I talk to schools, we end up with kind of 3 groups. There are those kind of working year 1 and above, where they are working towards the kind of on the national curriculum, but at a lower level. And therefore you can go and look at, for that child in year 5 working at year 1, what's the year 1 criteria, and you can break it down, or you can use B Squared where it's already broken down. But then you have those, and interesting, this is zone where no one knows what to call them. So you have engagement model right at the bottom, and they're like almost like, we know kind of, then there's this in-between bit. And some will refer to them as pre-key stage.
Or it's because they're so spiky, profiles, right? Those learners that are so often in the middle are really great at gross motor or numeral correspondence or recognizing colours and shapes, maybe. I mean, oh God, I'm being so stereotypical, but we've all got that picture of that child in our head, right? Because that's their interest. But they also, so they might be at year 1 reception age in those areas. But there's also some areas like maybe independence, maybe communication, maybe social affection, maybe fine motor skills even, where actually they are far below the rest of where they're at in other areas. So because of their spiky profiles, they're really hard to place. These children aren't easily placed in an area. And I feel like that's the point. You kind of need to take each area.
But there's no definitive language where we used to have P levels.
Yes.
And then you realise, oh, hang on, we stopped using P levels. The announcement was 10 years ago coming up to the removal, and how many teachers have come in since P levels and look at you when you say P levels completely blankly.
But then even then I had some learners in my special school that were PIII for some areas and were like way above P7, P8 in others. It's still, you couldn't just call them a P6 child.
No.
It doesn't mean anything because depending on the area, depending on their exposure to learning, depending on their interests and how we've been able to assess what they know, because that's the other thing. They might know it. It's just how do you then assess that? It's almost like encouraging them, facilitating an opportunity for them to show you what they already know, which can be part of the challenge as well. It's tricky.
But the government's, again, is like literally, where do you come up with this? And they've got the terms, the official terms are children engaged in subject-specific learning.
Okay.
Or children not yet engaged in subject-specific learning.
Okay.
So the children not yet engaged, that would be your engagement model.
Yeah.
And then you've got the children, they're engaged. Okay, what is it? Okay, cool, they're engaged. I've got my pre-key stage standards. And I'll be very clear, everyone, pre-key stage standards are end of key stage only. If you do not believe me, go read page 5, one of the paragraphs towards the bottom, where it literally says the standards are not a formative assessment tool. They should not be used to track progress throughout the key stage or to guide individual programs of study, classroom practice, or methodology. Teachers should assess individual pieces of pupils' work in line with that school's own more detailed assessment policy and not against these standards. Those reviewing school performance, including Ofsted inspectors, would not expect them to use for anything other than summative assessment at the end of the key stage.
Yeah. And this is the problem. Schools are being asked to create from scratch, or trusts are being asked to create from scratch these assessment tools and curriculums to suit their learners. And that is so, it's interesting, isn't it? Because some schools will do it brilliantly. They'll put a lot of funding behind it, a lot of research behind it. They'll get people in, they'll buy in programs. And that's wonderful, because then they'll have a really robust system in order to work from. But not all schools have that luxury or that interest or that inclination or the budget. Even though the people on the ground need it, they don't always have access to it. It makes it a bit of a postcode lottery as well, which is very unfair.
Very. And there's also those who are going, okay, so I can't use that. Where are they working? What can we use? Because there's kind of nothing. So a lot of them will then revert back to the early years.
Yeah.
And I literally had an email from a school recently going, I've got a child in year 4, but in the development matters, it says this, and it's very child-based. So I went, yes, because that's for children up to the age of 5. So that language is perfect for that. If they're at year 4, you probably should be using the engagement steps, which is our framework for the engagement model, or and it's that sort of, this lack of, again, freedom is great on one hand. You can do what you want. And if you're one of those people who runs with that freedom and just makes the most of it, great.
Yeah, and has the training and backing in their own experience to know what to and what not to do. The other thing is, they might be working on an early years level, but the actual early years provision isn't appropriate. So I've had lots of DMs talking about continuous provision. What does continuous provision look like in your room? And I just smile, because there's absolutely no way I could do continuous provision with learners like mine. Having everything out all at once is a visual nightmare. There's so much visual clutter in the room. It would be so dysregulating for my learners. It would be thrown, and it wouldn't be a learning tool at all. It would be a stimming tool, and it would be absolute chaos. There's absolutely no way I could do it. So yes, we can look at early years for some ideas on how to motivate. Maybe it's more fun. Maybe that's where they are developmentally, maybe, but maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe they want to. Who's to say that our learners don't want to, be with their age-related peers doing similar things? They want to do statistics, but they just can't do it in a similar way. But they want to be there, maybe. Or maybe they want to do how the early years do it, but it's not safe for them because they'll eat all of the resources, or it's too small, it's too fiddly, it's too open, it's too visually cluttered. So it's different. It is different. Even if working at that level, it has to be different.
And that's the thing, is whenever you're if you've got a child in year 6 working at year 1, you can go to that year 1 classroom and go, right, what's going on in here? What is supporting this learning? But then you have to take it and make it age appropriate.
Well, person appropriate.
So if they have in year 1 all the sentence starters all over the wall and all this sort of stuff, the really kind of supporting bits and all the number lines, because it helps all children, you wouldn't then go to year 6 and put them on the wall. Well, you might make an individual little pack that they could use themselves.
It wouldn't hurt any other children. And this is the thing, right? Often those supporting scaffolding help all children. So sometimes you would put it on the wall because it helps all of them year 6s, whether they have known it before or not. So it some of the scaffolding helps all children. Some of the scaffolding is bespoke and individual, and it's about making that best judgment. That's why I use the term person appropriate, because it's different for every individual. Some 11-year-olds need bottles and chew tools and teddies and cuddles and nursery rhymes and ribbons and shakers and rattles and all of those wonderful things. it's person appropriate. Other year sixes, that wouldn't be appropriate. It really is bespoke. So it's really hard. I suppose that's maybe why the government are struggling to come up with some one size fits all model, because you couldn't do that.
I also think part of the reason was A, cost saving, but B, whenever they do something, it's kind of, once you have a scale, once you have something, it almost ends up being weaponized as a way to judge. So I kind of get why they've kind of left it and not put any. It's up to you. And everyone, we always get asked, what is good progress? How do you know my children? I need to know if my children are making good progress. What's the formula? What's the guidance?
What is your answer to that? Because I get asked that too. And I don't know where these I come up with a percentage. I got told it years ago. I need to make a certain percent on the B squared, but I don't know if that comes from you guys or not. So I'm interested in your answer.
No. So what used to happen is we had the idea of 2 sub-levels for those who remember as P levels and levels and things like that. And in 2011, you had the progression guidance, which was done from a load of data. So it was statistically quite good, but then it got used really badly. It was actually good, but got used so badly. But it had all your get out clauses were in the document. You could quote sections. I had a version which I'd highlighted saying, just because those have made lots of progress doesn't mean it's good progress. And
Right.
just because someone hasn't made a lot of progress doesn't mean it isn't good progress.
Okay.
It's understanding the data yourselves. Now, if you ever use our framework comparison chart, we do have a standardized score.
Yes.
And you can use that to kind of work out their lifetime rate, average rate of progress.
Mm.
But that will purely give you a starting point. And I use it. We're going, okay, so how much do I have to fill in a year? What's the expected? And the answer is it depends per child. There is no standard answer. There is no formula. You should never use a formula. There's a whole webinars on this. Because every child is unique. You might have 2 children working at the same level. One has an EHCP and loads of support. One finally gets their EHCP and starts having barriers removed. Well, I'd expect that child to suddenly start making more progress. So there is no simple, the only rule, if anyone asks, I will talk about using that standardized score to work out their lifetime progress value.
Mm-hmm.
But even when you have that, it's a starting point, and it's always going to be down to the interpretation of the person.
Yeah.
Because you start bringing in stuff like Maslow's hierarchy of need and all those things which are going to impact progress, their home life transitions.
Yeah, hospital visits, appointments.
All those things, moving house, different route to school, might be all that sort of stuff.
Key worker.
All impact progress. And again, when you're asking what is good progress, what are you really asking?
And what are we measuring as well? I had this conversation on my podcast, what is good progress? Maybe they're making adequate progress in the subject areas, but they've made fantastic progress in their toileting or in their putting on their coat or their eating. Maybe they have ARFID and actually they've tried a new food this term and that's actually so life-changing to them. But there's nowhere to put that. Well, there is on B squared. And that's my point. That's why I've used it all of the time, because it's adequate. On B squared, all of the statements are about independence and social communication and relationships with their adults are equal to, they know numbers 1 to 10 and they can say 10 words and all of those things. It's both of them are ticking a box, and it both adds up to their level. It's all included.
Now, one of the things in the new Office Inspection Framework I really like, there's a section around, I can't remember the quote, but basically it's saying about for children with SEND, is the curriculum appropriate for them? Is their individualized curriculum appropriate for them? And it's a really important paragraph, because I think for years schools have been very much reading, writing, maths. Can't remove them from subject because you've got to get into the full curriculum. But this kind of section here kind of says what is appropriate, what is right for this child. And when you go back to right at the beginning, you talked about the EHCP. If the EHCP is saying actually their biggest barrier is their communication interaction, their SEMH, and that's impacting their learning, In reality, that's what their main part of their individualized curriculum should be on, is those areas. And that's where you should be putting the effort, and also be able to measure progress.
Yeah.
But that doesn't always mean a graph. It doesn't actually have to be numbers. It
No,
can be qualitative data.
videos, photos, comments, celebrations, post-it, observation notes.
It's just loads of bit which tell you actually what we're doing. They're in the classroom more. They're engaged more.
The behaviour plan is adapted, or they're going to put less ticks on their ABC chart, or whatever it is. Yeah, exactly. It's exactly that. It's all progress.
And you sit there at the end, and this is, I think, where I think people just want really simplistic data. They want to do that mainstream way of doing data and apply it to SEND.
And it doesn't work for so many children, let alone SEND children.
No.
Yeah, it works for maybe the average, but that doesn't mean it works in mainstream, really. I suppose, like, talking about this, I suppose you're thinking, okay, well, it all needs to be bespoke and stuff. So then how does your curriculum differ? Because how can you make that bespoke work for children that you've never met before? So what I've done is I've had my all lessons last either a whole half term or a term. And within that page, I've got all of the different learning objectives that you want to work on at the 3 different levels. So the first level will be engagement sets 1 to 3. So that's kind of 0 to 18 months, 2 years old. And then engagement steps 4 to 6, which is kind of 2 to 3-ish, if you want to put an age to it, because it's so tricky. And then progression sets 1 to 3 is kind of reception into year 1 kind of level. And so I've got those sections. And then I've got options for the lessons. So the idea being that whoever's leading with that child, so their tea worker, their TA, or the teacher that's leading that group, makes the best decision for them in that moment, that day, that week. So that is bespoke, because for one learner, they're working on one objective and it looks like, option 3. And then the child next to them, even though we're in the same group area, doing the same story time, they're working on a different objective with a different outcome, something that we're looking for differently. And that's why my curriculum works, because it flexes around the child rather than the child or learner having to flex to, the curriculum. So it's all there, and it's up to the teaching assistants, because they are incredibly capable colleagues, to know the child, to know them in that moment, to know what's possible for them in that moment that day. Because I couldn't know my PP8 time last week, what they were going to be like on a Monday at 10 o'clock. Our children don't work like that. So it's up to the people working with them to take my plan and think, okay, what are we working on today? Oh, they did really well at that last time. They seem like they're in a settled mood. Actually, they're already doing some sorting. Let's do that. Let's use that as an opportunity to connect with them, to assess them, to move them on whilst they're in that moment. So that's why the curriculum works, because it offers that flexibility.
And I think, so you talked about engagement steps and progression steps. If you have no idea what Jordan's on about, the engagement steps and progression steps, or primary steps, are frameworks from B Squared. And we go right down to birth with those. And that's the thing, what you're talking about is, and I think some people get confused between curriculum and assessment.
Mm.
To me, the assessment is, in B Squares, it's a skills you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And they are pretty consistent across all children. Counting is the same. The letters of the alphabet are the same. Yes, for different children, their communication might be different. But again, within our B Squared, we really kind of write them in a very inclusive way. So to me, the skills are pretty consistent. That's kind of what you're working towards, because that's going to lead them into the curriculum. It's going to lead them to independence, to friendships, all that sort of stuff, more regulation. Kind of those skills are quite universal.
Yeah.
The curriculum is the how, the when, the why.
What it looks like,
and what it actually looks like. What's the topic going to be?
Exactly.
What's your inspiration?
An objective could be labelling parts of a plant. We've all heard that as mainstream teachers, labelling parts of a plant. Okay, great, science. What does that actually look like for learners like mine? It can look like lots of different things. It could look like exploring a plant. I've got a lovely plant sensory story for my PMLD learners, so those that are working at engagement steps 1 to 3. And they can explore the smell, they can explore the petals, they can, we've got, scents, we've got, when we talk about the growing of a strawberry plant, and it's wonderful, and and we've got a massage story all about plants. But that's what it looks like at that very early stages, hearing that language, singing songs about plants, exploring stuff in soil and all of those things. And then it works up to pouring and potting and exploring light, exploring water, exploring smells and being outside in the environment and what can we see. And then it builds up to planting seeds and watching them grow and being responsible for that. And then it leads on to maybe laminated tasks where we're putting the pieces a bit like a puzzle of a flower together. Do they know where the leaves go? Do they know where the head of the flower goes? That's the start of labeling. And then it can lead on to using symbols to label and then writing to label. And all of a sudden you're at your year 1 level. So I've kind of broken it down into, that's great. We're going to all label plants of a flower, but actually what is realistic for our learners, what is meaningful for our learners. Maybe my PMLD learners, the objective is to label plants for a flower, but we also know that we're learning on being aware of our environment, exploring new textures, being willing to try new things, having a preferred item out of 2. That's our real objectives from the EACP. That's what really matters. That's what's legal. So I've kind of paired the 2 together. If we're doing science and plants, they can be working on those fundamental environmental awareness skills, and the rest are working on their sensory regulation skills and exploring textures and messy play and sorting and all of those things. And then my other learners, my progressions at 1 to 3, are doing the actual labeling of plant, because without those fundamental skills beforehand, they couldn't possibly learn to label a plant. So that's how the curriculum works. I've kind of brought all of these very mainstream topics, because that's the other thing. I call them science, English, maths, which is quite rare really for those kind of early learners. Sometimes they're called different pathways or different subjects, or they take the early years subject headings. But I've taken English, maths and science just so mainstream schools can take it and understand what it is and what it means. And then when the rest of the class are doing science or geography or humanities or DT, or it's all in there, they can look at my curriculum and think, okay, what does it look like for this child? And it might look very different, but that's inclusion.
But that's the thing, I think, yes. So within engagement steps, we use headings like communication, attention skills, preference and choice, which is kind of the level you're working at. But when you've got schools which, again, lack of funding, lack of time, lack of everything, are having more complex children, they're thinking English, maths, they're not.
Yeah.
And it helps them going, right, so in a maths lesson, do I translate maths into these areas, or actually with your curriculum, okay, what does maths look like at these levels? You're hitting these skills.
Yeah. What does
but
money,
it's just helping them.
Like money is such a great one, because my PMLD learners aren't going to use actual coins and money, but they can work on that skill. So they can work on exchanging an object. They can work on trying new foods, using new toys, going out into the environment, going out into shops. Exchange is a wonderful way of working on those early money skills. Number song, I love the current fun song. It's fantastic for exchanging a coin for something they can eat. We play sweet shop. We've got a puppet and feed food too. It's all part of money maths work. We're working on number skills. We're working on ready, steady, go. We're working on making choices. But we're working on money, which actually doesn't come up in B squared until, is it like, we think it's progression set to 1, I think?
Yes.
Actual money isn't mentioned. However, it's in there. It's all there. It's just what that looks like for those learners. And so with my 16 years of experience of trying to make this up for me, because it doesn't exist anywhere else, and I was in a special school, so I didn't know that there was growing need in mainstream. And then I moved to a mainstream school. So I was in a specialist provision classroom attached to a mainstream school. And I was shocked at how I could fill my classroom 3 times over with the need in mainstream, and with no foreseeable future of them ever coming into my class. They were mainstream children, but they weren't And mainstream loved them and were doing as best as they could with them, but there wasn't anything for them. Teachers were floundering over what the hell money looks like, or statistics look like, or Vikings looks like for these learners to make it meaningful. And that's the thing. We can waft, Vikings, we can waft fur and drums at them, but what are they actually learning? It's tokenistic otherwise.
Basically, yes. And sometimes you can get into assuming they're low level, really assuming that actually just experiencing is enough.
Yeah, and there's only so much experience you can do. I've met 18-year-olds that have been experiencing sensory textures their whole life, and it is boring. What are they actually learning? So it's great to have outcomes suitable and realistic and meaningful for them under the topic of Vikings, because that can happen too. You can have both. You can have it being meeting their needs and meeting their sensory interest, because so many learners learn on a sensory level alone, not an academic one. And that is perfectly okay. It needs to be meaningful for them, as well as those PMBL learners who might look from the outside like they're PMLD, but they're not.
Yes.
Their barrier is us. Their barrier is us not understanding that their cognitive understanding is far higher than it looks on the outside. So I want to meet both of those learners so I can sleep well at night. I want all of my lessons to be sensory based, so that I'm meeting those learners that learn at a sensory level alone. And I want it to be really rich, multi-sensory, meaningful experiences, not tokenistic ones. And I want my learners to have an academic opportunity. I use scientific language. We did oceans last term, and I was talking about bioluminescence. I was talking about, the ocean layers, because why not? I can do both. And that's what my curriculum does. So I'm so proud of it.
But again, you're in a different situation. So there are those children who might be in a resource provision in a school. And at that point, you do have you can have complete free reign over your curriculum, your topics and things like that. But in reality, you kind of want to link it to what's going on in the main school.
Yeah, Ofsted like that. And we did really well at Ofsted because it was linked to what they were doing in mainstream, because there's no reason why it can't be. It just takes a little bit more creative thought. And so, if you're running a nurture hub or a resource base attached to a mainstream school, there's no reason why you can't be inspired by what they're doing in mainstream, but think about what is meaningful for your learners, or the other way around. What are you doing, and then how to make it academic for mainstream. So kind of working together in that way is really exciting. And that is where my curriculum started. At exactly that point, we took the mainstream topics, one of them's evolution and one of the other ones is Vikings, actually. And then I took it, and it doesn't look like Vikings at all. It's not even called Vikings in my curriculum, but that was the basis of, okay, what does that look like? It's actually myself and I is the Vikings one. Because ultimately, before you understand about Vikings, you want to learn about your history, your family, yourself, actually. So your home and those things. So
because you need to be able to know that, then compare what's the difference.
Yeah, otherwise what's the point of doing Vikings? Otherwise you are just exploring drums and fur. And that's fine. Where learners will have a lovely year. It doesn't hurt them, but they could do so much more than that.
That's the thing. And I think, again, when you start linking, if you're in that resource provision, what's going on in mainstream. And I go to quite a few schools, well, not so much anymore with Teams meetings, but I used to love going to schools and seeing the displays. And if they're in a separate building, but they go into the school for lunch and they're walking past that display, if they're doing the same topic, that's inspirational. If their work can also go up on there, it's that building the bridges, it's joining the two, rather than feeling what's going on in here. Oh, I wish I could do that.
Yeah. And also, so often these children aren't in a separate provision. That's the reality now. So often they are in the mainstream class with a teaching assistant. They're your corridor kids. They're your in-betweeners. They don't quite fit in resource provision, as they're much more high support needs now. But they also don't fit in mainstream. They're your middlers. They're the ones that need sensory regulation and these kind of tangible lessons, but that actually can focus on some of the academic tasks too, and some of the social skills too. So they're kind of these in-betweeny kids. So it kind of suits those as well, where how they learn might look a little bit different, but actually it's more similar than maybe a reverse provision and everything in between. It's a spectrum of need, isn't it, across schools now? It isn't them and us anymore. We're all special education teachers now, whether you like it or not. We're blended now, and I think we'll only be better by supporting each other in that. So often specialist education is behind locked doors for child safety, but that also comes with it. People don't know what we do in there. People don't know what our learning looks like, what our lessons look like, what our assessment looks like, what our day-to-day looks like, because it's hidden. Even in my mainstream school, the teachers didn't really know unless they showed a real interest and wanted to come in what it looked like. And so my whole account is trying to celebrate and unlock the special education door on this is what it looks like. This is what we do. This is what happens behind that locked door and those pine gates in the playground. Because it's not an institution, it's really fun, it's really joyful, it's full of love and so much laughter and learning. Really, really high level learning.
And again, if you can then link those topics together between that resource provision or whatever the room's called this week, and the school, then the teacher in the school is able to see what those children can achieve. So what does that look like for them? They produce, the links are there and it helps them understand. But the bit I was kind of going to go on to is, I was talking about that kind of that separate provision, but as soon as you get into that mainstream, that child's curriculum is going to be very much decided on by the mainstream curriculum, the year 3 curriculum, the year 4. And you have those who are working below, but near that, and you can adapt. This is what we're working on. I'm going to adapt it.
Yeah.
But for me, adapting can only go so far. To me, there's an adaptation range, and it might be you can go down 2 years developmentally. From that's what you're aiming at, you can adapt. Once you go beyond that, it is different.
Yeah,
it's
and
differentiated.
in mainstream, there are year 5 and 6 learners in my mainstream school that are working at an academic stage of like age 2 or 3. So just socially, communication-wise and learning-wise, it looks so different than their peers in their class, which often is a real weight on their key workers, because so often the teachers can try their best, but they don't really know them and how they work. So it's up to the teaching assistant to come up with the curriculum on the fly, their time, their budget often, and it's just not fair. It shouldn't be that case. They are doing an incredible job, and I can see that they know their children so well and they are making it work, but I want to hold their hand in this because I have already worked it out. And my price points show that actually, the price point starts from £15 a year for my entire curriculum. So, because I'm aware that TAs are having to beg, borrow and steal for resources, and I don't want this to be another thing that schools can't afford to support them in that. So yeah, that was really important to me, that it was very much written with them in mind, as well as everybody else. It was written with the teaching assistant in the corridor, in the bistro, teaching in the library, these incredibly high needs children that need a bespoke curriculum that kind of been left behind a little bit, but not by them. And I kind of wanted to support them in their mission with that, because I see them, I see the good work they're doing, and they're doing an incredible job.
So one of the things, again, that it's, to me, adaptive, it's different. We're into differentiation, whether you like it or not. And adaptation is differentiation. As soon as you do anything different, it's different.
Yeah.
Not going to go down that. But one of the things we've done, you mentioned like evolution. And I can't remember what year evolution is a topic, but one of the things we've done within our science framework is we've differentiated it all the way down. So every science topic starts at 18 months. So when you're doing that topic in year 6 on electricity, but you've got a child working below year 1, well, this is what that topic would look like for them. And I think I see things on like, oh, my teachers can't write smart targets. My teachers, they can perfectly if they understand the level and all that lot, but they haven't got that time to understand.
Or they don't have a relationship with the child to know, because they're outside of the class so much for their own regulation needs, which is inclusion also, because if they can't cope in the environment, then that is the right thing to have them in learning in a different space. But it means the teacher doesn't know them. So how could they possibly plan for them? If they don't know where they're at, don't know what they enjoy, they don't know them. Then it often does then lead on to the teaching assistant.
It does.
Which is, I had a DM from a teaching assistant saying, the teacher just lets me to do all the planning for my one-to-one. Is this okay? And my answer was, legally, it should be the teacher's responsibility because they are in their class. They should know them well enough in order to be able to plan for them. However, if I was a teaching assistant and I started my career as a teaching assistant, I wouldn't want a teacher who doesn't know my child to be planning for us because it's only going to go one way. So then you're at a crossroads, aren't you? Do you do somebody else's job for them where it really isn't your job, but know that you'll get better outcomes for the child that you really care about, and it's more meaningful and more suited to them because you'll do a great job. It's some TAs are fantastic. They're worth their weight in gold. But the system doesn't change that way. I feel like that's where that's why we've gotten to the point that we've got to, is that how everybody's picking up other people's slack, and it's
what you need is you need that communication. It's the teacher's legal responsibility. The teacher is going to be talking to that parent at parents' evening. The teacher is writing that report. So they really need to know where that child is up to, what's working well, what's not. So you have to have that communication. And again, if we're talking that much lower, the TA can't turn up in the morning and go, "I'll go for it." And you're like, what? There kind of needs to be that actually a teacher's going to do some of the work. The TA will fill in the gaps and we'll get that outcome. But that communication then from the TA has to go back to the teacher. Okay, so where are we doing? Did we aim too high? Did we aim too low? Did we get it right? Is there progress happening? What are the barriers?
And across the school as well, because I'm sure there are other learners in other years that are working at a similar level. So maybe there's some kind of collaboration happening there. Maybe they are year 5 but working at a year 1 level. Let's collaborate with the year 1 teacher. Let's see what learning looks like. Maybe you've got a resource base or it's the same code. Let's collaborate together and see what that looks like. But that means completely rewriting the curriculum up to be inclusive for these learners, which is what should be happening. But obviously, how and when do you do that, I suppose, is the next question.
It's going to be interesting because there is, we have got a new curriculum coming in 2 years. We've got the white paper, which I won't go into because we don't know. We literally don't know. So I'm not even going to question anything in that because we just snippets, which we don't even know are true or not.
And they're talking lots about inclusion, aren't they? They're talking lots about meeting the high level student needs in a mainstream school. That is very clear that that's kind of where they're going. And I'm very intrigued because we're already there. I'm really interested in what they think that looks like.
What I would say is some are already there.
Some are already having to be there. I mean, they might not be doing a good job or not, but the kids are there. The kids are already in mainstream. That's not new. That's not a new thing. There's very high needs children in mainstream schools.
And it is a case of like, there are those who are absolutely passionate and will go out their way and research and find out and use their own time, like the TAs DMing you. And there are those who are in schools where just send isn't seen as that big priority.
Yeah, or they haven't had training. I mean, let's think about our teacher training. I did mainstream teacher training, actually. And we did 1 day on dyslexia. No, maybe even a lecture on dyslexia. And that was it. That was our special needs training. So let's bring it back to, apparently it's better now. This was a little while ago. I still don't think it's good enough. And from what I'm seeing from people and from, messages and things. So I think it has to start there. Like, I don't know who it's to blame, honestly, because if teachers aren't given the tools and understanding in their training, then they're no better off than anyone else to do it.
When did you start teaching?
2009.
So what's interesting is anyone who started teaching in the last 12 years have only ever taught on one curriculum.
Wow. Yeah. So I remember the new one coming in.
The changes.
Yeah.
And to me, the old P levels and levels, good or bad, it was a continual ladder from P11 birth to level 8. And if you're a classroom teacher, let's say you were year 5, you might have some just touching onto level 4, some level 3, some level 1, some P8. But you knew where they all were. And there was guidance around what that looks like and things like that. Now, I think most assessment systems, if a child's in year 5, they're above, they're below.
Yeah, I hate that. Because they could have done so well. They could have, progressed so far and made so much progress in so many areas, but they're always going to be below. And it doesn't actually tell you anything. All of my learners, it's quite funny actually, I think it's funny anyway. They have to have the EYFS when they're at the end of research, they have to have the EYFS, assessment.
The profile.
And every year the EYFS comes into my classroom, which is the only time they ever come in also. They come into my classroom, a bit sheepishly saying, I've got to do these EYFS things, like, are they meeting any of them? And sometimes they say, oh yeah, gross motor skills, sometimes that's a good one, but sometimes it's not. And then they're below in everything. And I just think that doesn't tell you anything about my learner, because my learner is doing incredibly well. They're meeting all their IEPs. Their communication is doing so well. Their social skills are amazing. They're transitioning really well in between home and school, which was real tricky. They're eating so much better at home. They're going to the toilet. I don't know, all of those things. And just to mark them below just seems like a real kick to them and their efforts. I hate it.
No comment. The short version is no comment, but I am completely in agreement, and we've always been in agreement since the kind of 2014 curriculum came out and they started using this below language. It wasn't really there before that.
Yeah.
Before that, we used to have, year 6 would have a donut with a percentage on each level.
Mm-hmm.
But we knew exactly where they are. Since 2014, we've had this below. And it's kind of inferred it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, there's no resources, there's no assessment, there's no this. And so many schools have struggled. We've always, in B Squared, we can always say exactly where a child is. It's what we do. So
right,
a child in year 6.
It's from birth. It's from literally only tracking and noticing a light and reacting to environmental sound. That's what we're talking about here. We can assess that. That's really exciting, because it means that that's a way of me showing my learners' progress. And that's really exciting. And it's really exciting to then share it with parents, because they might not understand necessarily what the percentages mean, but they can see them going up, which they're really excited about. And it's really lovely to share that. And it's really lovely to share what that then looks like in meaningful ways, like photos and videos and comments and pieces of work if they can make them. And that's really exciting, because you can really celebrate the actual progress that they're making.
And you can do, because we've got various graphs and visuals, you might see actually they can see that their child has made more progress in writing, which you already talked about was their area they struggle with the most. There's increased progress, and it's almost like they can recognize, we discussed that, you've put the work in, that rate of progress in their area has increased. Wow, that was, and just the visuals, and that rather than just saying below, you can actually talk about where they have made progress, what the next steps are, the barriers. And it's meaningful to them. It gives them confidence. Right, my child is making progress. They might not be flying compared to their peers, but for them, they are flying. They are making progress.
For all children, isn't it? It's all that matters. Let's also not forget that some learners go backwards because of medical need, because of their diagnosis, because of, missed school, or there's lots of different ways. Epilepsy, there's lots of different ways why children might go backwards and lose some skills. Or they might be dormant skills because of their anxiety, whatever. There's lots of different reasons. It can measure that too. I've never found any other assessment tool that can measure that, because it's really important that we measure that, because we want to know where they were before and where they are now and where they'll get to. That's part of their journey just as much as anything else.
It's interesting, when I've had conversation with schools, we generally mention regression, because it does happen. If you start talking about really complex, we do handle regression. And sometimes they say, we're not allowed to show that. Or they'll say things like, we're not allowed to do that. And I'm like, I don't care. If the child is regressing, they're regressing. Just because you've got a policy which says they can't, doesn't mean they won't. It's assessment starts with the child. And I think so many schools use systems where you are literally trying to put a child in a box, in a system, which box fits them best. Whereas in reality, you can have 5 children who are all in theory the same level, are completely unique. One could be so spiky, and this is their weakest area. Another could be so spiky, and this is their strongest area, or whatever. And others are not spiky, others are the way they communicate. And your assessment system, maybe not for reporting that to governors, but for the next teacher but passing that information to parents should show that uniqueness. It should be able to, that next teacher, see where those children are, what are their next steps, what progress have they made.
And just practically as well, we're only one teacher or one teaching assistant, and we might be assessing 11, 12, 13 children using different systems. So if you've got the engagement model for this lot, and then you've got, whatever, it makes it so difficult. Whether you've got early years development steps for one lot, and it makes it so confusing. And then what happens when a learner is in that area for some subjects, but not in others? So confusing. But at least having it all in one place and one system helps that. It helps have it collated and all in one place. So yeah, B-squared's been incredibly helpful for that, because otherwise, it would be an impossible and a huge task.
And I think one of the things the schools really like, just touching on that, like early years and this, is we always link our skills. So a lot of schools have a completely separate early years team. They're doing their early years journals, they're doing the early years assessment against the development matter statements, and they go into primary, start again from nothing.
Yeah.
Whereas if they can count to 10 in early years, they can count to 10 in primary. If they can recognise their name, they can and it's that sort of thing. And a lot of schools, when they come to us, are like, you can do that? It's like, yeah, why wouldn't you? And it's things like that transition, rather than doing things in isolation. And we have so many frameworks that they all interlink. So it might be you're using autism progress, and as part of that, you've got communication, but those communication skills will overlap with the spoken language and the PSHE, because it's the same skills. It's just a different lens you're looking through.
Yeah, I've noticed that lots, actually. As I'm assessing, I'll start with the top one or whatever. And then as I'm going through, there's less and less to mark off because they're already done for me. I've already done it in another subject, which is also rather lovely. It kind of feels like I'm cheating the system, but it's a good one to do it with.
Yeah, it makes sense. If you're sorting by colours, I'm probably guessing that colours is going to come up in art, and you can recognise the colours. And so if you're doing that in maths because you're doing that statistics, but it's also in art, why not fill it in because you've covered it? It's that skill. It's the same thing.
Yeah, and in science and light, and in exactly. Yeah, I guess I think this. I always say this is the business I never meant to start. It really did happen accidentally, and it just started because I wanted to share and celebrate what was in my classroom, because I felt like we were doing a really good job, and I wanted to celebrate that. And then I started getting messages saying, well, what does your timetable look like? Oh, I like that. Can I have a copy of that? Or what does, I thought I'd do this topic. What would you do? I think, do you know what? Have it. just have it, because I've already done it. And then more recently, so that was, I've been doing the curriculum. I'm on it's last 4 years, my curriculum, it rotates. So I'm on the end of my second rotation now. So I've been doing it for 8 years. Which is great. But then more recently, I've noticed, the curriculum didn't work. I've kind of sussed that one. Okay, well, phonics now doesn't work. Phonics doesn't work for the learners I've got in my class. It used to work for learners in my class. They've now up and left, and they're all in mainstream now. The learners that I'm getting, phonics isn't doing anything. It's not teaching anything. I feel like, again, it's just tokenistic. I'm just jumping through the hoops. They're having a lovely time. We're doing some lovely sensory sounds. We're doing sounds on sound buttons. We're doing little songs. Is it actually teaching them to read and write and communicate? Is it meaningful for them? And that's where the core work program came out, because lots of my learners were having AAC devices or core boards. And I thought, well, I'd much rather, focus on that, on your functional communication and being heard and seen and validating all total communication. So then that came from that. And then I noticed that, okay, the children are feeling really anxious about not wanting to transition to my group area, and they're finding being part of a social group really challenging and really difficult, and transitions are a massive part. And finishing an activity is really huge anxiety for my learners. Okay, I'll create a therapy about that. So I got together with lots of therapists and special education teachers, and we created RISE therapy, which is a neuroaffirming system to support learners to join a group with lower anxiety and support communication that way. And I know it's not the last one, because I keep seeing these things that our children don't fit this. It doesn't work for my learners. And as it seems, my learners are getting more and more high need for whatever reason. I think more and more so they're going into mainstream, and, more and more so special education teachers they're getting the highest need. We're having to adapt. And so then what I do then supports mainstream too, because they're now getting the cult children that I used to have. Like my class 10 years ago in a special education school wouldn't be in a special education school now. They'd all be in mainstream. So they could speak, they could do academic learning, i.e. paper, tabletop tasks. There was minimal behaviour, maybe sensory regulation needs, yes, but they could manage in a classroom with some support. They're in mainstream now. And they were in a special education school provision 10 years ago. So we need to adapt with that. And we always support each other because I recognise it's new and you haven't been trained in this. So that's, I'm here to help, basically.
But I love your story of company didn't intend to start that. It's exactly the same with my mum starting B Squared. I'll do this till someone creates something and I'll just use that. So she created it and then copies and then, can I have that? And then we started and then my dad did the software.
Yeah.
And we've grown ever since. But it's always been, and again, a bit like you start off with that academic stuff. You're starting off with, this is the bit I'm struggling with. And what you find is as you do that really well, you notice that's not the first bit. That's actually, there are barriers to that. So then you go look at those barriers and okay, there's a barrier to that. What are those? And we, like all our different frameworks we add in, but also because your kind of curriculum, we're assessment and data, you start going that, what is good progress in English? Well, what's the impact? And they go, well, how can I prove it? And it's like, do I need to change how we do our English? Do I need to change the curriculum? Well, actually, how regulated are your students?
Yeah, it has to.
What's your behaviour like? What's the safeguarding is? What's their attendance like?
So
If their attendance is 30%.
My courses. So now I've got courses teaching about sensory regulation and AAC and communication so that you can even get to the curriculum. So often in my DMs, I say, oh, I'm just looking at your curriculum. Like, is it right? And I'm like, oh, tell me about your learners. I'm like, oh, it will be right, but not yet. You need first get your sensory regulation tools. You need to learn about intensive interaction. You need to learn how to tell your story, how to engage your students, set up your classroom appropriately so that they're regulated and can access those learning, and then add in the curriculum. It has to be that way. Sensory and communication has to come first. There's a reason why I'm called sensory classroom. It has to come first. The children have to be regulated in order to learn.
And I think, what we're trying to do is kind of help show that. So when you're looking at data, you look at that maybe behaviour, you look at attendance, you look at those things which are kind of, if they're not in school, they're never going to learn.
Yeah.
If there are lots of safeguarding concerns, they're really dysregulated, that's never. The behaviour, high level, low level. Actually, to get the progress in English, we need to increase the attendance. We need to reduce those. And we don't just say increase attendance. We ask, what's the barrier? What's the reason the attendance is low? How can we change that? How can we make that transition from home to school easier? What can we do to increase that?
Yeah.
Not just tell them.
And it doesn't have to be number. So supporting our learners to feel more heard and validated and understood and regulated can happen in lesson times. So often mainstream schools are hearing these buzzwords now and they're getting on board with sensory circuits and movement breaks, which is fantastic. They're doing it in between learning, which is better than nothing. But how much more impactful if the regulation is through learning, embedded in learning. Your lessons are following the sensory circuit template, or your lessons are catered to your learner's sensory regulation needs. Maybe they need really high contrast in order to engage and learn. You can make your lesson that. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe they find high contrast far too overwhelming, dysregulated, and they need some neutrals. Your lesson could do that. So by understanding these fundamental skills, like the happiness audit that we mentioned like an hour ago at the beginning, and in the sensory regulation course, if you know where your learners are at, then we can make such better learning opportunities for our learners. It has to be embedded. So I feel like we're kind of juggling all of these balls, and I'm there like flinging them at people like, you need this, you need this, you need this. And it all kind of fits like a lovely little education puzzle of this is what learning looks like for our learners and your learning now.
There is no simple, it's working out within all these areas where each child is, what their next steps are. So it is, although you've got this lovely framework and all these tools, the individualized, the bespoke part is where they are in it. Yeah. Not, I have to create something completely separate. No, it's a framework. As soon as you say a child can do this and a child can't do this, that's bespoke.
Yeah.
You start to do that, but you don't have to think, I've got to create something for every child. It's no, use a framework, because also the framework makes that communication with others. When you are talking to your TA and you're just making it up in your head, it's really hard for your TA to go, where is she going? Whereas if you've got a nice framework to work on and go, right, we're currently here, we're now trying to get to there, they can look at all the steps in between and go, cool, I'll work on them. I'll look out for them.
Stays on the same step for the whole term, that is also okay. And if the learner is on a different step every single day throughout those 12 weeks, that is also okay. That's when it gets differentiated. That's the bespokeness of it. But we're all doing the same lesson. It's just in different ways.
Yes. And that's the thing. And I think when people get worried, I've got to do something completely different. No. Just the same.
Everybody wants more work. And I understand that. I don't want more work either. We don't have capacity, energy, time, finances, budget, know-how to take this on. So I've tried to make it really user-friendly so that, on this core program, you log in and it's all there. Your only job is to get the learners to the group area and you can start going. Same as the curriculum. Yeah, your job is to print the resources or resource the story that I've created for you, and then you can just go and use it. I've really tried to minimize the impact on teachers because I'm aware that you have already got so much. And just the fact that you have found yourselves on a page like mine and accessing resources like mine shows that you are doing your absolute best already. So I need to honor that and respect your loyalty and make it as easy as possible for those learners, those teachers that are really, really seeking something that their learners need and are finding all these alternative ways. And I love social media for that, to connect everybody and find that. The world is so small now. We can have speech and language therapists from Australia in our pockets at any time. And I just think that's really exciting, actually. So where the government are maybe failing at teaching and educating teachers, at least that knowledge is out there. If you know where to find good information, I suppose that's the other thing, isn't it? There are trusted sources of information out there, and there are compliance and control-based resources out there that may be evidence-based but may not be as suitable for our learners. And my fear is that these well-meaning teachers and parents will come across something that looks great and looks suitable but could actually be quite harmful. So I suppose through my podcast and through who I'm bringing on, who I'm collaborating with, I'm really celebrating those that I feel are doing it really well and doing this neuro-affirming, compassionate, child-led, learner-led, person-appropriate teaching really well, because there's so much poor practice out there that isn't going to set up your learners for independence or great self-esteem or good mental health in the long run.
So one thing I'm going to need to wrap it up, I just want to mention is I went to a conference back in September, which was all about autism. It was research driven. Mm-hmm. And I was there with a head teacher I knew, and they went into this talk to hear this amazing stuff. She came out really disappointed because what they were talking about is groundbreaking research they've been doing in her school for 6 years. So when we talk about evidence-based, sometimes research often follows someone trying something, realizing it's working, and then they try and research why it's working. That research takes years. So when we talk about evidence-based, it doesn't necessarily have to be research-based because that takes a long time. And also in the world of SEND, that kind of pool and the opportunities to do research is really tiny. And as everyone's individual, the actual research may not actually show much.
Yeah, and also just because something works, just because something helps your learners to communicate better, doesn't mean that it's neuro-affirming. It doesn't mean that it's kind.
So what I would say is use people you know, people you trust. What are they recommending? What works for them? It doesn't have to be, yes, there is the EEF stuff in the toolkit, but actually when what you're doing doesn't work, is go out to your peers. What are they saying works? And again, just don't take it and drop it into your school. Will it fit your school?
Yeah. And use it continuously with questions, adapt it. Don't think that just because that's what that somebody on social media has given you, including my stuff, adapt it. All of my stuff is editable for a reason. It has to be editable because all of our classes, all of our learners are so unique.
Every time you try something new, you should be following an APDR cycle with that. I've assessed we're not doing that. I've researched, found sensory classrooms curriculum. That's my plan. We're going to do it. How's it working? Is it working? Is it doing? Why is it not? Is it us? Is it we need to tweak it? Is it we're not? What is it? What is it training? And just you keep doing that cycle with everything you do. We shouldn't be doing APDR with the students and that specific thing. Everything we're doing in school should be going through an APDR cycle.
Yeah, it's just the safest way, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Right, I'm going to wrap it up. I could keep talking, and I have loads of questions in my head, which I'm not going to ask because that will be going on for another hour. Thank you for coming on today. It's great to talk about a topic that I'm really passionate about. The small steps of progress, the making sure all children have a great education, not just experiences because we're not sure what to do with them. And I still think back to a boy who was in my class at secondary school, and he had the TA wrapped around his little finger, and it was so like he wasn't challenged, he knew. Things like that and going, it's that listening and understanding and giving and helping them achieve whatever that looks like. We should be aspirational for all pupils. As always, I always share my guest contact details. So in the show notes, you'll find links to the Sensory Classroom website, the curriculum, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. You'll find lots of links to find out about everything Jordan does. And obviously you can DM her like everyone else does. And as always, you'll find the show notes on our website or wherever you listen to the podcast. If you want to get in touch, let us know your thoughts, suggest topics or anything else, please send us a message to us on social media or send an email to hello@thesencast.com. The Sencast is created by us here at B Squared, and as we've mentioned in this podcast a little bit, we help show the small steps of progress pupils will send and make. We do it for a wide range of abilities and ages with a range of frameworks to suit students from birth all the way through to 25 with our Steps for Life framework. But at the other end of the scale, we have our engagement steps, which is for those on the engagement model, but we do it differently. Visit the B Square website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through our assessment software and how it can help you. But for now, thank you for listening, and we'll be back next week with another episode of the Sencast. It's goodbye from me.
Bye. Thanks for having me.
Bye, everyone.